Oh, it's 5:01. So we are ready to call to order the City of Delray Beach Board of Adjustment meeting for Thursday, January 16th, 2025. And now we will do the roll call.
Mark Ronald.
Present.
Jesse Slesser.
Here.
John DeLacio.
Here.
Brenda Cullinan.
Here.
Deanna Morales is absent. Richard Kasser.
Here. Okay. And now we will move to approve the agenda. Staff, are there any changes to the agenda?
No, sir.
Okay. All right. Do we have
Motion to
Any-
approve.
Yep.
Second.
Mark Roland.
Yes.
Jesse Slesser.
Yes.
John DeLacio.
Yes.
Brenda Cullinan.
Yes.
Deanna Morales is absent. Richard Kasser.
Yes. Okay. We'll move along to the approval of the minutes. So we have 4 meetings to approve the minutes of. Does anyone have any changes to any of these 4? Okay. Is there a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Mark Ronald.
I'm going to abstain because I wasn't at those meetings.
Okay.
So just to clarify, you do have an obligation to vote on a motion unless you have a conflict. Even though you may not have been present at the motion, you are still required to vote on the motion.
And I'll
So
approve.
Thank you. Jesse Slesser.
I approve.
Yes.
John DeLacio.
yes.
Brenda Cullinan.
Yes.
Deanna Morales is absent. Richard Kasser.
Yes. Okay. And now we will move to swearing in the public.
Please raise your right hand by the authority vested in me, the notary of the state of Florida. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Okay. And do we have any comments from the public for any non-agenda items? All right. Seeing none, we can close that and move on to the public hearing items. So this is a quasi-judicial hearing, and this hearing shall be conducted in accordance with the City of Delray Beach quasi-judicial rules. The applicant and the city shall be permitted to present their case. The public shall be allowed to speak for 3 minutes each, or a maximum of 6 minutes if the person represents an organization or group of people who are present but agree not to speak. The city commission board members, staff, and the applicant may be allowed to cross-examine a witness. The city or applicant will be allowed to offer rebuttal testimony. The decision to approve or deny an application or appeal may not legally be made upon personal views as to whether a project is a good project or not, nor may a decision be based on the numbers of citizens who support or oppose a particular project. The law requires that all decisions must be made on the basis of whether the project meets the requirements of law, the comprehensive plan, and the land development regulations. Okay. So now we can move on to item number 2025-071. This is a consideration of a variance request from Land Development Regulations for a swimming pool for 412 Southeast 4th Avenue. And
Hi, good evening. Jennifer Buse, planner for the City of Delray, and I would like to put into record file number 25071 for 412 Southeast 4th Avenue, and the applicant is here.
okay, do we have any ex parte communications from any of the board members?
I drove past the site.
Okay, I also drove past the site and looked it up online and looked up at the property appraiser's website. Okay, and now we're ready for the applicant's presentation.
Good afternoon, Chair, board members. My name is Corey O'Gorman with Place Planning, 700 US Highway 1, Suite C, North Palm Beach. I'm here with the owners, Patty Britton and Miguel DaCosta. We're going to review the subject application for a variance to allow a dipping pool in the front yard setback area, for which we respectfully request your approval, and we appreciate your consideration this afternoon. The zoning allows a swimming pool in the front yard at a 25-foot setback, where the request is a variance to allow a setback of 15 feet with a 10-foot variance from the 25-foot requirement. The site's located at 412 Southeast 4th Avenue, which is on the west side of 4th Avenue between Southeast 4th and Southeast 5th Streets, just west of US 1. The property is located in the R1A zoning district, requiring a minimum lot width of 60 feet, lot depth of 100 feet, and a lot area of 7,500 square feet. The property is the reconfiguration of portions of 2 lots and measures a total of 57.41 feet in width and 93.7 feet in depth, with a total lot area of 5,607 square feet, and is non-conforming with respect to the required zoning requirements. The nonconformity is one of the conditions that generated the need for the variance. This dipping pool is proposed to be minimal in size and will be buffered from view of the neighbors and of the right-of-way, so there is no impact to the neighbors or surrounding properties. The pool will be 7 feet by 13 feet, will comply with the side setback, and will have a small 3-foot pool surround for access and lounging, but is minimized to reduce the required variance and to ensure that there's no impact on the neighbors. The pool was designed to be a minimum in size in an effort to comply with the criteria for granting a variance. This slide shows the property survey, which illustrates the proposed location of the pool. And as mentioned, this proposal requests a variance of 10 feet to allow a front setback of 15. This reflects the narrow pool width designed to ensure that this is a minimum variance needed in an effort to comply with the criteria for granting a variance. The proposed pool is designed to be compatible with nearby swimming pools, both of which are in the front yard areas to the north and south, although they were constructed without the need for a variance. This slide shows the location of the existing pools at the neighboring homes to the immediate north and to the immediate south, as well as the proposed location of this pool, which would be tucked in the south side of the front yard, just next to the entry walkway, and will have similar screening that's provided by the neighboring pools shown in the next few slides. These next few slides are views of the subject home. This is the house at 412 Southeast 4th Avenue, where the dipping pool will be located. It would be in the left-hand side of the screen to the left of the driveway. The neighboring home to the immediate north, showing landscape buffering, which, if approved, the homeowner would install similar landscaping to buffer the proposed pool from view. This neighboring house to the south, again, is showing fencing and landscape buffer, illustrating that there'll be no impact on the neighborhood or neighbors. Although we realize that each circumstance and property is different, the Board of Adjustments has granted variances to other swimming pools for setback encroachment in the front yard. As an example, this slide shows an aerial view of the construction at the property located at 311 Southeast 3rd Street, which was granted a 14-foot front setback variance to allow a swimming pool. At this time, I'd like to introduce the owners of the subject property, who would like to provide you with some additional background information.
Hello, this is Miguel DaCosta, and I am Patty Scott Britton, and we appreciate your time today. So we thought as some background, we would tell you a little bit about us and our process. And we've been in Delray for over 10 years, most of which we've spent in Osceola Park because we love it. We love the neighborhood. We love Delray. It's great. So when we found the vacant land in April of 2016, we were really excited that we had an opportunity to move here. You could kind of say that we were pioneers in that we were the first to build a new house in the Osceola Park area. And we made a really big effort to make sure that the house fit in with the neighborhood. We wanted it to look right. So this was well before the Osceola Park neighborhood improvement project. I know you know all about that, and it's been awesome because we have street lights and sidewalks and landscaping, and the alley, which the alley running alongside of our home, 93.7 feet, was nothing but a tangled bunch of brush and cables and trash. So we're grateful that that project went through, and it's been wonderful. It's been a huge change for the neighborhood. So after continued due diligence and preparation, we finally submitted our request in September 4, 2018. And unfortunately, 4 months later, on December 20, the engineering department disapproved our request. Our permit was disapproved based on the fact that they said prior to issuance of a permit, we were required to sign a perpetual sidewalk easement, provide a 2-foot right-of-way along that alley, that 93.7 feet, and submit required documentation with sketch and legal description. So these were new regulations that rolled out after our original permit. And so that's why Planning and Zoning didn't know anything about it when we went through our due diligence, because they weren't implemented and effective until afterwards. And I understand it now. There's a new process in place, prerequisite permit process, so that the engineers do see it before, and Planning and Zoning is up to date. But for us, the new regulations were costly in both time and money, because in order to comply, we had to develop a new survey, legal description. We had to update the engineering. We had to re-engage our architect and revise the house plans to comply with a 2-foot right-of-way while maintaining the same basic rooms. And the revision further reduced the size of our backyard, essentially giving away 187 square feet, which is the 2 feet of the right-of-way by the 93-foot depth of the property. So, as discussed, our lot is really small, non-conforming, very narrow, and therefore the home design is pretty basic. It's nothing fancy. It's 4 rooms, a garage, laundry on the first floor. And it was really important to us to make sure we had a first floor bedroom, because at 70, we're getting up there in years. So we wanted to make sure that was there. So the rooms aren't especially large, but just a basic house. And although not necessarily germane to your decision, this whole process was extremely arduous for us. It included 3 builders, 3 years, more costs than planned, 67 city inspections, COVID, and more. So finally, on June 4th, 2021, we got our certificate of occupancy. We were ecstatic. And over the next couple of years, we noticed 4 or 5 front yard pools, which, was new for us, within a few blocks of our home, including 311 Southeast 3rd Street, which is there, where the pool variance was granted. It sits 5 feet outside their front door, and they got a 14-foot setback. And we said, gee, we have kind of different circumstances as well. Let's see if we could get one approved. We effectively have 1 yard, defined as the front yard, that would be large enough for a dipping pool. It's not a swimming pool. You can't swim in 7 by 13 feet. It's more just to dip and relax a bit. And it was designed to make sure that it took minimal amount of space. We don't need a side easement. That fits perfectly. So we think that with the appropriate fencing and landscaping, the pool is going to blend perfectly with our neighbors. And it would be important to us to be able to enjoy some of those privileges that everyone gets to. So thank you for listening, and I'm going to turn it back over to Corey.
Thank you. Thank you, Patty. So regarding the criteria for granting a variance, the special circumstances include the nonconformity of the lot with relationship to the city's code, as well as the required alley dedication that Patty brought up, and the subsequent redesign of the home described by Patty. Literal interpretation would deprive the applicant of the ability to install a swimming pool in a manner similar to the adjacent properties, as well as other residents in the community. The special circumstances of the lot nonconformity and alley dedication were not the applicant's doing. They didn't result from the actions of the applicant. Because of other variances that have been granted and the neighbors have similarly configured pools, granting the variance would not confer a special privilege. The pool is designed to be a minimum size, so this would be a minimum variance to allow a pool on the property. And granting the variance would not have any impact on adjacent properties as it is minimized, and it'll be buffered from view from both the neighbors as well as the right-of-way. So we do sincerely appreciate your consideration and your time this evening, and we're here just to answer any questions that we can. Thank you very much. That concludes our presentation.
Okay, and now we'll hear from staff.
Hi, this is item number 7A. It is for 412 Southeast 4th Avenue, and the variance request from the land development regulation is from 4.6.15 G1A, which is swimming pools, whirlpools, spas, and yard encroachments, to allow the construction of a new swimming pool within the front setback area at a setback of 15 feet, whereas 25 is required. This is just the location. It is in R1A and is surrounded on R1A with all sides. This is just a kind of a blow up so that you can see where the alley is and the streets. These are pictures. This is the home right here, and then as Corey said, these are the neighboring properties. Oops. So again, this is just in consideration. It's just a little brief. The requirement is 25 feet in R1A, and they are looking for a 15-foot encroachment. So here are the R1 zoning districts required the minimum standards, and this just kind of outlines everything again. The lot size is 7,500 feet with 60 by 100. 412 is approximately 5,600 square feet width. It was 59.4, and then the width was 93.7. And in our mobility, in our comprehensive plan, there is a requirement if there is not enough of the street classification, and an alley should be 20 feet. Each side has to give 2 feet whenever there's any improvements going on. So this was a new build, so that's what it required. So when you are considering this variance, I'm just going to summarize again. You have to make sure that there are special conditions and circumstances not generally applicable to other lands, structures, or buildings. That this would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other properties. Special conditions did not result from the actions of the applicant. That this would not set a special privilege. And this is the minimum variance that will make it possible for them to have the pool, and that it is in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the existing regulations and in harmony with the neighborhood. And that concludes my presentation. Those are the board options. Oops, what happened to my picture again?
Okay, thank you. Does the applicant have any rebuttal from staff's presentation?
Chair, we actually need to call for public comment first.
Oh, okay. All right. Is there anyone in the public that would like to comment?
Good evening. My name is Chris McGatt. We live at 414 Southeast 4th Avenue, right next door. And we're certainly in support of this. And I think that given the nature of the neighborhood and what's been happening development-wise in the neighborhood, we have seen not only the property on 3rd Street, but also the property on 5th Street. And I think there are 2 or 3 other ones where folks have needed to put a small pool in the front yard, primarily because so many of the lots in Osceola are just simply small lots. And as they are developed or redeveloped, I think this is probably going to be a reoccurring occurrence, and it may make some sense to look at that area specifically and maybe make some different, set some different guidelines for folks that live there. Because I think, as you've heard from our neighbors, it is an arduous process to go through, and it's very daunting. It's very overwhelming and intimidating to do this, and I think a lot of people don't do it because of that. At the same time, those that are willing to step up and go through the process will ultimately benefit. So if there's a way to relook at the neighborhood as a whole, make it more reasonable, the setbacks more reasonable, I think it would not only save you folks a lot of time, but also make it a better neighborhood for the neighbors that live in the area and create more consistency in the neighborhood. But we're in full support of the application.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we have no rebuttal. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any
No,
staff?
there is not.
Okay. All right. Well, now we can go on to the board discussion. So we can just start.
I have some questions for staff, one of which I mailed previously. We now understand that one home has 14 feet, if I understood the presentation. What about the other 2 homes that have gotten variances? What is their setback variation?
Each variance is to stand on its own. You're going to compare apples to oranges at that point.
But we've been given an apple, so I'd like to see the orange.
Yeah, so each piece of property is really unique, and we look at the variance language in the LDRs. They talk about having unique property or structure involved. It probably is important for the board to know or understand that there's been other applications approved in the zoning in the same zoning, because 2 of our elements are deprivation of rights commonly enjoyed by other properties in that zoning, and then also ensuring you're not conveying a special privilege to similarly situated properties in that zoning. But I don't think it'd be appropriate to focus on whether one variance was 10 feet or one variance was 12 feet or this one's 15, because they're all uniquely situated with different size properties, different existing structures, different things they're trying to do. So I think it's important, but I would probably steer you away from getting into
I understand
the
that.
specifics.
Nonetheless, I think I have a valid question, given the fact that one property of 3 was presented. That begs the question, why was that presented and not the other 2? So if you have the information, I'd like it. If you are unwilling to give it, so be it.
So the other 3 properties were in their justification. 509 Rye Lane, as explained earlier today in my email, they withdrew from the process. 203 Southwest 2nd Street was a duplex, and 311, when I actually looked it up today, they also received a reduction in their side setback.
How much was the reduction? That's the question.
I don't see where it's relevant to this project.
You may not see it as relevant, but I see it as possibly relevant. And I believe that you have a responsibility to answer the question.
Again, my advice would be to not get into those semantics.
I understand your advice, and I respect your
If you want to answer the
position.
question, I mean, you can.
I don't understand how this is actually relevant, the other ones, because at this time, you are focusing on what is before you and if there are special circumstances and conditions to this property.
I understand what you're saying, and I think that's a valid point. But nonetheless, I believe it's a valid question, given the fact that part of the presentation, to justify this, presented information about another property. And I would remind everybody here that this is, the more we change, the more we give on the LDR, the weaker the LDR becomes. We ought to change the LDR. Maybe it should well be changed to 15 feet. I think that's a valid point. But that's not our job right here. So if you're going to present information, let's have it all, not half of it. And I will make a point out of this if I don't get the information. I just want to let you know. Because it's not correct.
I think, well, the concern is that if we start going down that path, it has the potential to the claim that it's that outside application has tainted the review by this board of this application.
I understand what you're saying, and you're
Right.
absolutely right, but that's already happened.
Well, I think the information that was presented is to
You
show
allowed that information to be presented. You didn't object to that information to be presented. So I would like to hear the rest. You mentioned 3 properties in the application. So it is not unreasonable to ask about the other 2, and I frankly don't understand why I'm not getting an answer.
William, staff did not present that. That came from the justification letter from the applicant.
Nonetheless, it's in there.
if it came from the applicant, if they have the information and they're willing to answer the question, they certainly can if that's the board's request.
I'm asking if staff has the information and is withholding information to a board member, I'd like to know that. And I'd like to know the information that they're withholding from a board member. If they don't have the information, fine, because I can't reasonably expect it. Nonetheless, I have asked for it prior to this meeting.
Again, I would say I probably would avoid
I
going further
understand
into
what
this
you would
conversation,
do,
but
but it's different than what I would do. I'm a member of the board.
I understand. I mean, if
I understand the
Staff
law
wants
and
to-
I understand
to answer the
Robert's
question,
Rules
I
of
mean, they
Order. And I was
certainly
appointed
can.
to this board to do a job.
If I'm going to do it off the top of my head, the 203 Southwest 2nd Street was actually my variance, and if I remember correctly, it was 10 feet. And this one's 9. 311 Southeast 3rd was 9 feet.
Thank you. I have another question.
Just to be clear, the variance was 9 feet, or the setback from the side from the property line was 9 feet?
I'd have to find the staff report.
Good follow-up.
I
Thank you.
just, if we're going to get the information, make
Big
sure it's
difference.
Looking it up.
Thank you.
While they're looking it up, do you have any other questions for the applicant?
Yes. It's my understanding that on new construction, which admittedly this is not, that the pavement around a pool is included in the requirement for the setback.
It is the water's edge.
It is the water's edge on all pools?
Yes.
I have no other questions.
I guess maybe while that's being looked up for the applicant, I think when I look at the condition about no action of the applicant, it's hard only 5 years later to see that this wasn't foreseeable when you were doing the new build, because it could have been designed around. So that's something I'm struggling with to understand why the house couldn't have been designed with this in mind.
Patty, can you address that?
I guess maybe a corollary what you're answering is, were there any variances granted during the new construction? Because it looked like the side setback is less than 7.5 feet.
No, there were no variances granted.
Completely with it.
Yeah.
7.5 on each side, the setback is 10
Could you just come speak in the microphone? Thank you.
So, both sides have 7.5 feet. We had 9.5, but we had to give you 2. So that's the difference there. What was the other question? I'm sorry.
Oh, just why this wasn't considered when you did the original design.
When we were building, as you see, we had 3 builders, but when we were doing it, it was really important for us to have a first floor master bedroom so that we wouldn't, like our neighbors, their bedrooms were all on the 2nd floor. So that's how they got their space. I mean, we don't have a big house, and we have basically a kitchen, a tiny study, a bedroom, a garage, and a laundry.
Okay, I mean, maybe just for staff, and if you could pull up the site plan, just show us where the 7.5 feet is, because the document I'm showing, it looks to show a 6.26 foot boundary to the side. I'm looking on the left center edge of the image. That's 6.26.
I just have one question.
It does look that way, doesn't it?
For staff or for the applicant?
Yeah, whoever, I don't know, whoever, it's staff's presentation, but it was in your application as well, so.
So this is a survey that we did specifically for the pool, and it actually was different than our original survey. Just add complication to what's already complicated. So if it says 7.5, I'm very surprised because we were very clear on making sure that we complied specifically because it was so arduous. We wanted to make sure that we did it all correctly and made sure that the 2 sides were 7.5. So
Just to clarify, the number you're looking at, is that you're referring to the setback of the building? Is the question?
Yeah,
Okay, so I would just,
I guess, because I'm looking at
Yeah.
the R1A zoning, and it says 7.5 feet, and I didn't
Right.
find that on there.
but I get, the only thing I'd just remind the board, the only thing in the application is the pool itself. So if for some reason that number,
No, but I guess the
Change
calculation I'm
something, yeah.
doing, just to be transparent, so they say they lost 180 feet. In my calculation, if you subtract off the front and back setbacks, that's 60 linear feet by 2 is 120 lost feet. So I'm just trying to think if I'm going to give a variance and credit because they had to shrink their side, should I also deduct any variance they got when they built the building if they didn't build to 7.5 feet on the left side?
we didn't get a variance.
Yeah. Okay.
We didn't need one because we were on 7.5.
Right.
And if it is 6.5, that's a building problem.
If you look at the fence line, you can see probably what happened, because you should see the fence kind of veers out and probably gave them another foot. And who knows, the fence might well be right, and when they did the second survey, that could be wrong.
All right.
Okay.
And for the applicant, I just wanted to ask you, I know you have like one of your neighbors here representing, saying that there's no problem. What about on the other side of you or any of the other neighbors?
None.
Is there any problems at all? Has any letters been written? No problems at all, right?
No.
Okay.
Nope, they all were aware and are aware that we were going for a variance.
And do they
And
have,
we had our sign in front.
and are there any ones on, near you, like a couple of doors down, have the same situation where they have a pool in the front?
My guest
Besides
him, there's another one on the other side. They're aware on our other side of the street, and then 311,
Okay.
and then the Stewart and Shelby homes on 5th.
And so doesn't seem to be any problem with your neighbors then? Okay.
None, and it will look. You won't even know it's there, just as the beautiful landscaping.
Well, that's
and
all. That's
everything.
what I want to know.
Yeah, for
Thank
what it's
you.
worth too, when I drove, because I was skeptical of is it in harmony when I drove by. It definitely
Yeah.
is in harmony. That's not my concern.
Yeah, I
It's really
understand. Yeah.
was it unforeseeable by the applicant? And is it the minimum? Those are the two I'm struggling with a bit.
Do you have any other questions?
Not right now.
Okay. No questions? Okay. I just have two questions for the applicant. What type of fence and what screening will be going in? Because I think we saw the rendering that shows, looks like a white fence and some landscaping, but just describe for us what will be the barrier.
So the neighbor to our south has a combination of a black metal fence, correct me if I'm wrong, with cement. The neighbor on the other side has, I think it's just black metal fence, and you can't even see it because of landscaping. We would probably just do the metal fence and not the cement part of it.
Okay, and then you'll have landscaping
Oh, for
to
sure.
shield it. Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if I could. And we would also put some plantings in front of the fence so nobody could, so you'd have privacy as well. So nobody would be able to see the pool walking by the sidewalk. Just like Mr. Mygot's house and our next door neighbors.
Okay. And then this is again for you guys, since you were involved. When you had to redesign your house due to the alleyway taking, did that push your design and the footprint of the house further back in the lot
As I
to
understand
pull
it,
space from the backyard?
right, we had to shrink it this way and grow it that way. I couldn't find detail on the exact numbers, or I would have presented it. But,
Yeah.
But yes, in answer to your question.
Okay. Okay. Okay, that's all the questions I have. Does anyone else have any questions?
Just really quickly, we pulled up the permit and we confirmed it was 7.5.
Thank you. Maybe one follow-on question for staff, just subjectively, because one of the things that always gives me a degree of sympathy for variances is lot sizes below the minimum. Is that common in this neighborhood?
Yes. This is one of the oldest platted neighborhoods in Delray, and most of the lots were platted at 50 feet wide, and we require 60 feet in R1A. With that being said, some are still at the original 50 feet, some are a portion of a lot and another portion. To do new construction here, there are variances that come through for sides, fronts, rears, pools, etc. So yes, it is common in this neighborhood.
Any other questions?
Chair, if you're ready, I can begin reading the board order.
Yes, I think we're ready.
Just a reminder, the board order will consist of all 6 elements read out loud. After each element, Ms. Miller will do a roll call. The order is written in a way that if you find that the element was supported by the evidence, then it's a positive vote or a yes. So they're not written any type of double negative or anything. At the end, it's just a reminder for the Board of Adjustments to approve a variance. It requires 5 positive votes. So we have 5 members tonight. So should any member vote negative for one of the elements, that means the board will have found that the element was not met pursuant to land development regulations, and we'll talk about the motion after we've gone through the elements, okay? So this is the Board of Adjustment final board order for file number 2025-071 for the January 16, 2025 meeting for the property located at 412 Southeast 4th Avenue. The request is consideration of a variance to the Land Development Regulations Section 4.6.15 G1A to allow the construction of a new swimming pool within the front setback area, maintaining a setback of 15 feet. Pursuant to Land Development Regulations Section 2.411A5, following consideration of all the evidence and testimony, the Board of Adjustments for the City of Delray Beach finds as follows. 1, that special conditions and circumstances exist which are peculiar to the land, structure, or building involved, and which are not generally applicable to other land structures or buildings subject to the same zoning. Ms. Miller?
Mark Ronald,
Yes.
Jesse Slasser,
Yes.
John DeLacio,
Yes.
Brenda Cullinan,
Yes.
Tina Morales is absent, Richard Kasser.
Yes.
2, that little interpretation of the regulations would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other properties subject to the same zoning.
Mark Ronald,
Yes.
Jesse Slasser,
Yes.
John DeLacio,
Yes.
Brenda Cullinan,
Yes.
Tiana Morales is absent, Richard Kasser.
Yes.
3, that the special conditions and circumstances have not resulted from actions of the applicant.
Mark Ronald,
Yes.
Jesse Slasser,
Yes.
John DeLacio?
Yes.
Brenda Cullinan?
Yes.
Tina Morales is absent. Richard Kasser?
Yes.
4, that granting the variance will not confer onto the applicant any special privilege that is denied to other land structures and buildings under the same zoning.
Mark Ronald?
Yes.
Jesse Slesser?
Yes.
John DeLacio?
Yes.
Brenda Cullinan?
Yes.
Tiana Morales is absent. Richard Kasser?
Yes.
5, that the reasons established in the variance petition justify the granting of the variance and that the variance is a minimum variance that will make possible the reasonable use of the land, building, or structure.
Mark Ronald?
Yes.
Jesse Slesser?
Yes.
John DeLacio?
Yes.
Brenda Cullinan?
Yes.
Tiana Morales is absent. Richard Kasser?
Yes.
And 6, that the granting of the variance will be in harmony with the general purpose and intent of existing regulations, will not be injurious to the neighborhood or otherwise detrimental to the public welfare.
Mark Ronald?
Yes.
Jesse Slesser?
Yes.
John DeLacio?
Yes.
Brenda Cullinan?
Yes.
Tiana Morales is absent. Richard Kasser?
Yes.
Okay, as a board, you have found that the applicant has met all 6 elements in the land development regulations. Other than the chair, could I please get a motion to approve the variance?
I'll motion.
Second.
Mark Ronald?
Yes.
Jesse Slesser?
Yes.
John DeLacio?
Yes.
Brenda Cullinan?
Yes.
Tiana Morales is absent. Richard Kasser?
Yes.
Pursuant to land development regulations, section 2.17F, all decisions of the Board of Adjustment are final based on the entire record before it. The Board of Adjustment approved the variance solely for the purposes as presented at the meeting. That concludes the board order, Chair.
Thank you. All right. We will move on, since there's no other items, to reports and comments. City staff, you have the floor.
I will be sending out the meeting agenda the week of January 27th. We will be having a meeting on February 6th as well as March 6th. I have no other updates at this time.
Okay.
Nothing from me, Chair. Thank you.
I have one general comment. I noticed there was a house on Andrews Ave that was in, I think it was in the paper, or it was from the zoning board, that they had to get a variance for a taller front yard fence.
That was a waiver.
A waiver. Can you maybe, just for my own edification, speak to how that goes to them versus us?
Correct. So variances pertain strictly to the land. Oh, goodness gracious. Whereas a waiver, oh my God, I'm not using that thing anymore. I'm sorry. Whereas a waiver applies to the height of a structure. So a wall, if you want if you want relief from over east of the intercoastal, we require what's called a front step back requirement. So it applies specifically to a building or structure. That is why they had to seek a waiver rather than a variance.
Thank you.
So think of a variance as anything on a horizontal scale, whereas a waiver is typically for something that's on a vertical scale. You're an engineer. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Isn't there a difference on new construction as well as, or am I incorrect? Is that which committee it goes to?
Waivers go through a different process.
Right.
They actually go to the commission.
Right. Some of those are horizontal.
Well, correct, but they don't apply to the land. They apply to a structure itself.
So if another structure subsequently went on the land, they would also need
If
to
they
get a
wanted to
waiver.
be higher or wider, but if they wanted, actually I take that back, if they wanted to be wider, they would have to change the land requirements to allow for the setbacks, to allow for a wider structure. If they wanted to exceed.
Are you saying therefore they would have to come to this committee? That's really my
Correct.
question.
Yes. If you want forgiveness to your setbacks, you have to get a variance. If you want forgiveness to height regulations, you have to get relief in the form of a waiver.
Related to that, if someone's submitting that, are we aware that they're seeking both? Or are we supposed to make a decision in isolation of each other? Because if there's conditions peculiar and they're seeking a height waiver, that may go into our decision about, okay, then they've already kind of double dipped on what is that special circumstance.
Good question.
It would be included in probably both reports. They would obviously go at different times. But again, one is one is a waiver, one's a variance. And again, you've got to look at the findings for both and make a call from there.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Any other
I have a
board comments?
I don't know what to do about this, but it seems pretty obvious that with the diversity of neighborhoods and history and one LDR, it becomes quite a challenge, like today's session.
That's a process and procedures type of issue, it seems, right?
I mean, it's
I don't
really
know what
why.
we do about it other than recognize it's the reality of the world in which we live.
Right, and that's really the entire reason behind having the variance and waiver purposes, because to write an LDR that would address every single variable, based upon our neighbors and historical character, and then future character is something as a potential would be, my opinion, an impossibility. So we have, standard regulations that work for the majority of our properties and locations, and then when they don't, this is why you guys exist, to help.
But the LDR doesn't really give us the flexibility. Being I'm an engineer as well, so we work in ones and zeros. The gray that you folks work with is more of, at least for me, sometimes more of a challenge. But that's the world. It would be nice if the LDR in describing the committee structure would at least acknowledge that the committee can take those factors into account. I don't believe there's anything in there to that effect. Just a thought.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it was related to the case, but in general, I am curious about the direction, because on one hand, those other properties weren't in the staff report. So it's like, do we expect staff to have something that's not in the staff report, even if the applicant does? So is the burden on the applicant to have the information about the other exceptions they're demonstrating as exemplar of why we should consider it? Because it wasn't in staff's report, but I could see applicant needing to have that information to your questions.
Sure.
But maybe if we weren't comfortable, we would have deferred a decision if we didn't have the information, and that was material.
But anyone can present anything that they want, and the goal of a variance, as said by staff, is that it needs to stand on its own and not be ruled for or against by past variances that were also issued. So I understand because they presented it, and there's the curiosity of like, well, what else and what this, but it shouldn't play into any decision that we make as a board, because we're only considering this one lot, this one issue, not what happened before or potentially what will happen after.
So the onus is on us to reject the evidence and say that's not relevant to our decision, not even ask the question.
Yeah, I think it's for me, where I stand with this, because everyone, or other people voice their opinions, I think it's good to know what has happened and what's going on in the neighborhood from a similar use perspective. But again, it should not procedurally play into or even be sort of influenced in an official way into any decision that we make, since our job here is just to consider this one application, this one lot, not what goes on around it or anything like that.
I agree with you, but at the same time, the 6 items kind of bring all that back into consideration.
The harmony.
All of them.
And that's where
All of them.
I don't disagree that knowing these other circumstances exist, especially in proximity to this property, those aren't completely irrelevant, because like we've mentioned, is it harmonious? Is this going to be the outlier in the neighborhood? Is this consistent with the neighborhood?
Something that's offered to
special
other
privilege,
people.
right? So I don't think that it's right to say we should completely ignore, those types of properties. But what I would encourage the board is to not get into whether it was 10 feet or 15 feet or 9 feet on those other properties, because that property may have had different dimensions, or the existing structure provided more or less flexibility for that piece of property, or it might be different if they're trying to put the pool on the corner of an intersection versus, something in the middle. So while it's important to understand whether this is in harmony with the neighborhood by seeing other examples and whether it's potentially a special privilege, would try to steer you away from getting into the details as much into those other situations, just because it opens the door for somebody to argue you're now ignoring these and just saying, well, if 10 feet worked for that guy, why can't 10 feet work for you, even though your property's not the same.
Yeah, and that's where I was going with it, that it's good to know that these other variances have been issued or that they do exist, but that just on a global sort of overall level, not getting into the details of, well, like you said, this is 9 feet and they want 8 feet, so.
Not into the details, I would
And
agree.
these houses
but
are all designed in a different way
right.
too.
Had the other two been 6 inches, I might well have voted differently. I mean, being pragmatic. The fact that they were similar, to me, it also spoke to the integrity of the presenters.
Yeah.
That's would have been a problem for me.
All right, well, do we have any other board comments?
Did we give them the next date? Because I know it's only 2 weeks
Yes,
away.
I did. It's up on the
Okay.
screen, too.
Yeah, February 6th. Great.
Yeah,
Okay,
we'll be here.
all right, well, with that, I believe we can adjourn the meeting.
Yep.
All right.
Okay, very good. See you in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.